Welcome back to the Warehouse Podcast. I'm Tyler,
Jesse.
And I'm Eli.
and it's good to have the three Musketeers back. I don't know if you like that comparison, but
Amigos.
the Three
Yeah.
Stooges, maybe. But the trio is back together after it's been a while. I think it's been a month and a half since we last got together for an episode. I know you two got
Yeah.
together for one episode in my absence, but
I was gonna say, I think me and Eli need to sort of publicly apologize to you here for dropping the ball on our second previous episode without you. So me and Eli were planning to do one last week, and we should be apologizing to the audience too. But but anyway, yeah. So.
It just didn't feel right. You know, we are better when we're all together. The team is at full strength. You know,
yeah.
Tyler came back from the 10-day IL,
Yeah.
and we are here and we're firing on all cylinders now.
Absolutely, the way it should be. And we're ready for a second half push here, just like our beloved Baltimore Orioles, which we'll get into the second half here later. But before we get into that, we want to talk All-Star break and the current state of the Orioles. We're recording this on July 10th, just before the Home Run Derby. We're kind of going to try to speed through it as we want to sit down and watch Adley Rutschman hopefully put on a nice display repping the Orioles, but we'll see. We've got about 40 minutes or so to do that. So if you look at your podcast app right now and it's got more than 40 minutes, we probably didn't make it in time. So we're going to try to
We failed, right?
Yeah. We're going to try to do this pretty speedy. We're going to talk All-Star Game and what it means for the Orioles. We're going to talk about a couple recent call-ups and how they're performing so far, the current state of the Orioles starting pitching, and if they need to maybe make some moves there, as well as the picks in the 2023 draft so far. That hasn't wrapped up just yet as of this recording, but the big picks have been made. And then finally wrap up by talking about the second half outlook and what we're expecting from our birds moving forward. But yeah, let's start with this week. It's All-Star Week. It's really more of like a 2-day thing, but we'll call it All-Star Week. And first, let's start with the competition tonight, which is the Home Run Derby. Adley Rutschman is the ultimate underdog tonight. I think the betting lines have him as like by far the lowest odds to win the whole thing. He goes up against Luis Robert Jr. in the first round. Tough draw. Jesse, you're laughing. What do you think, Jess? Or what are your thoughts on his outlook here?
Yeah, I mean, there are a whole bunch of sluggers in this contest. So nobody is like an easy matchup, not by any stretch. But of course, Luis Robert is, I mean, granted, he's a very good contact hitter for being in the Home Run Derby too, but that doesn't detract from his power. He has a ton of power. So he's a great hitter, 5-tool player. And if Adley makes it through Luis Robert, maybe you start to have a little hope that he could win the Derby entirely. Yeah, I mean, Robert is a big dragon that he's going to have to slay first in order to have any hope of winning this thing. I mean,
hold on.
Yeah,
there's also Vlad and Pete Alonso, who's won it twice.
Of course.
Robert is the favorite. Well, I don't know, the favorite.
He's the
quote
top
unquote.
seed. Yeah,
he's the top seed, right? Because he has the most home runs this season, but. I don't know. I would think that he might be third on my list of who I would think is most likely to win this.
Oh, absolutely.
It's an interesting matchup because, like, when you just think of Luis Robert and Adley Rutschman, both of them, I don't think of either one of them as like Home Run Derby contestants.
Right.
I mean, you look at the numbers, and obviously Robert's hit a ton. I think he's second only to Shohei Ohtani in the AL for home runs. Adley is, so in that regard, it's not surprising he's in it. Just kind of his track record, I wouldn't have expected it. Adley is surprising in all ways because Adley's not even leading his own team in home runs. He's like third on the Orioles. He's not the first guy on the Orioles I would have thought would be in a Home Run Derby contest to begin with. He's a catcher. So it's an interesting pick by MLB to even have him in the competition. My guess as to why he's in it are a couple is, one, he's a young player that I think the league expects to be a big deal for a long time. And potentially another one is he's not from Seattle, but he's from Portland, Oregon, which is about 2.5 hours away, kind of a hometown dude. And that's kind of because Portland right now doesn't have an MLB team. So kind of a local flavor there. So I don't know. I'm not, my guess is he doesn't win the thing, but I sort of have a similar feeling to when Trey Mancini was in it a couple of years ago, where I didn't think Trey would get out of the first round. Like, he clearly was in it because of the feel-good story, but he ended up going to the final and just lost to Pete Alonso, who apparently supports cancer. I don't know. That was a weird move by Pete Alonso to beat Trey Mancini there, but that's what he did. So I don't know. Prediction on Rutschman's outcome, though. Eli, do you think he gets through the first round? If so, how far does he get?
Well, I'm going to be honest. In this moment, I don't know who he would draw in the second round, but I think it's about 50-50. You know, he had the longest home run of his career in the game before this break here. So he did go 461 into the upper deck in Minnesota. Mm-hmm. So, you know, maybe he's like feeling himself a little bit after Minneapolis, and he's just, you know, coming back home. It's a little like grand celebration of all things Adley Rutschman, and he goes off in this first round. I could see it.
So to give you all the bracket is set already, so it doesn't reseed. So Rutschman, Robert, whoever wins that would play the winner of Adolis Garcia, Randy Arozarena. So, and then obviously you play the remaining person after that.
I think I like Adley against Randy more than Adolis.
What I will say is Adley, I expect to hit left-handed tonight. He'd be the only left-handed hitter in the field.
Yeah.
Advantage? I don't know. I honestly don't know. But
one thing that could be interesting is if we see Randy versus Randy, because Randy Arozarena and Randy Rutschman, Adley's father, is thrown to him.
Oh.
And we could see who's really the dominant Randy in Seattle tonight.
That would determine it.
Yeah.
That the guy who throws the BP is an underrated element of all of this.
Definitely.
Jess, same question to you. Prediction for Adley tonight?
Yeah, I think Adley will exit in the first round, unfortunately.
Wow.
Oh man!
But with that said,
just lie to the people.
No, we want honesty.
Well, now I'm conflicted. Should I lie or should I be honest? No.
Well, you've gone too far. You have to be honest.
Yeah, right. Exactly. No, I think he'll exit in the first round, but I think he'll have a decent showing. Yeah, I could definitely see him putting up over 10 home runs in the first round and having a pretty good performance. So, I don't think. I think it was like Jason Kendall or somebody like that a long time ago. Jason Bay, right? That like didn't hit one out. I don't think we're good. Thank you for that, Tyler. I don't think we're gonna have a situation like that with Adley. He does have enough just raw power, and he'll get a hold of some and make them go far. But Luis Robert is, I mean, the whole thing, this whole field, I mean, is really, really difficult. So, but Luis Robert is probably among the tougher. It's interesting. I mean, I do think Robert will win, but I will say he is sort of a line drive hitter. I think inherently, like he doesn't have the sort of like home run. He doesn't get under the ball, I think, to the same degree that like certain other power hitters do. But with that said, I still expect Robert to move on.
Fair enough. I'm just taking mine real quick. I'll say he gets through Robert and then loses to Adolis Garcia in the second round. That's my prediction. Yeah. We'll see. All right. The other big event of the week is the All-Star game itself. The Orioles have sent 4 players to the All-Star game. Rutschman is going to be going as a reserve. Austin Hayes is starting in center field, which is sort of an odd one since he doesn't even start in center field on his own team. But he made the team as a reserve and then got promoted to the starting lineup because Mike Trout and Aaron Judge are both out with injuries. And then also, who's the Astros guy that's hurt? I forget his name. The DH. What's his name? Jordan Alvarez. He might have played outfield if he made it too, because Ohtani is DHing, right? So that's probably another injury that plays into it as well. But Austin Hayes has had a great first half, so he deservedly makes the All-Star team. And then in the bullpen, the Orioles could potentially be responsible for the 8th and the 9th innings tonight. We'll see which way the manager goes. Felix Bautista and Yennier Cano both make the team. Eli, thoughts on the Orioles that have made the team? Were they the right four? Should there have been more? Should there have been less? What do you think?
I think this is the correct four. These dudes have all been phenomenal. I don't know. We've talked about them all year. I'm just hoping with Adley being the reserve, credit to Jonah Heim. He's had an amazing year, but Adley being the reserve actually kind of benefits us because we have the chance to end this game with an Adley Felix hug. And honestly, what could be better than that is like the AL securing the win. Felix comes in blowing 103. You get the double thumbs up and hug. I think it's going to happen just because it would be such a wonderful moment, and it'd be a nice way to announce the Orioles on the big stage.
It's true. I would like to see that. Jesse, let me know your thoughts on that, and if there's anybody maybe missing that should be there in the All-Star representation, or what do you think? You are muted.
And
currently.
Jesse's muted.
Me and Eli did talk about this. I think last episode we recorded together. No, I mean, I think this is the right four. We had talked about Hayes a little bit and kind of were leaning against him. But his of course he's had a great year. He's had a fantastic year. I think he's been instrumental just for the Orioles to have him solidified sort of in the lineup. He's sort of taken the place in some ways. Obviously, he's had slightly different role than what we would have Mountcastle do, but he's sort of compensated for Mountcastle's injury and struggles throughout the year. So, no, I think he's been vital. I think it makes sense. It's unfortunate with Mullins getting injured. I think it was just too much playing time in the end that he ended up missing. So that was unfortunate for him because I think if he had been playing throughout the entire season, he would have deserved to have joined the four of them. But other than that, no, I'm looking forward to it. I don't think anyone else on our team really has a real strong case to go. I mean, maybe there's a case for Santander in there. But when you stack them up against some of the other guys like Ohtani or like Alvarez, of course, you just said Alvarez is injured, but it's going to be tough for him to make it. So,
did you say Tyler Wells? Did you mention him? No, I think he's the only other one that I would think is like a reasonable consideration. Leads the league in WHIP. He's had a really good first half, but sorry.
I think he's reasonable. There's a certain factor of like flair and high strikeout numbers and any number of things that I think just work against him. Obviously, I think all O's fans appreciate how good he's been, but on the surface, I think the home run numbers to the casual fan, the lack of strikeouts, that kind of deal, are probably just deterrents.
I think the other thing with that too, though, is this is sort of Tyler Wells' breakout season, at least in the starting rotation. He's had good seasons in the past in the bullpen for us, but this is sort of his breakout. So, give it another year. If he has a similar year next year or the year after, I think we will see him in the All-Star game. But I think like what Eli said, it just given all those considerations, it doesn't make as much sense. So.
Yeah, no, I hear that for sure. He definitely reminds me of like when Chris Tillman made an All-Star game though, where it was like, like he's the best pitcher on a team that doesn't have a ton of good pitchers, but the team is good. I could have seen Wells getting a nod there, but I understand him not making it. But very excited for the All-Star game tonight. Hopefully it'll be a good one. But let's move on to a couple promotions that happened the past couple weeks that we haven't gotten to quite yet on the show. Colton Cowser and Jordan Westburg have both been promoted from AAA Norfolk. These were promotions that I think we all expected to come at some point this season. Westburg has had a good season plus in Norfolk between 2022 and 2023. Cowser got called up to Norfolk at the end of last year, struggled a pretty good amount down there, struck out a bunch. Returned this year, has just crushed the ball all year long and got a little bit of a surprise promotion just recently So Eli, what do you think about these two promotions? Were they deserved? Were you ready for them? Are the Orioles ready for them? Just kind of your general takeaway from these two promotions.
Yeah, so I guess first thing, like deserved and readiness, yes, across the board. Like these guys have been ready for the major leagues. They have, shown their mastery of AAA. The Orioles needed them. They needed the Orioles. Everything is happy. I think that Westburg, the timing was a bit more obvious. It was like, okay, this is definitely the time for him right now. Just because of some of the struggles of, our major league infielders offensively. Frazier's been struggling, obviously Mateo, and Ramon Diaz has been right about league average as a hitter. He's been getting a little bit more time recently, but no one of them has really taken hold of a position, I think, the way that the Orioles would have wanted them to. And I don't know. I think that, with the flexibility that Gunnar gives us, we have the opportunity to inject, a MLB ready bat into the lineup, spell those guys who are all struggling for a time, slide Gunnar over to short, which we've been doing, and it's a supernatural fit on this team. I think that Westburg also, the Orioles have been stacking up switch hitters and lefties, and that's all wonderful. Westburg is, a nice amount of thump and contact from the right side. He's a super well-balanced hitter. And I think that, as Mountcastle has, been struggling with vertigo, as the infielders we talked about, obviously not including Frazier, have been struggling a bit. The right-handed hitters in our lineup as a whole became a very, very thin group very quickly. I was pretty much just Austin Hayes representing. So it's nice to inject a good right-handed hitter. Cowser was super interesting to me. I think the thing that was most interesting was I think this is the first time I've ever felt that Elias and the front office were reactionary in a call-up, reacting to a moment. The Orioles had dropped a number of games in a row. They called him up mid-series in New York. And, obviously it's worked, but we've won 5 in a row heading into this break with Cowser. It's kind of cool. He's never lost an MLB game, but it's just a bit more interesting because obviously we do have 4 starting caliber outfielders right now, 2 of which are borderline all-stars, one of which is Santander, who hit 32, 33 bombs last year, and the other one is Aaron Hicks, who came over and was on this otherworldly run. So there's much less of an obvious fit for the Orioles. That said, I think they've done a good job managing it, rotating Santander and Hicks through the DH spot. They've gotten Santander some time at first base, when they want to play some matchups, pulling O'Hearn out of the game against a lefty, et cetera, et cetera. I think the Orioles have managed it really well, but I think it was reactionary in a good way from the front office. I think that they were saying, okay, we are starting to see ourselves fizzle out a little bit. Let's give this spark. And, based on 2 double-digit wins against the Yankees and then the Twins, you got to say it's worked from the short-term results. So super exciting. I think both of these guys are studs. I think, we'll see how the trade deadline goes, but they definitely could be fixtures in our lineup for a long time. Just super exciting.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's awesome. I agree with you totally that it was sooner than I expected. It caught a lot of people off guard. I'm just so used to the Twitter, atmosphere complaining about so-and-so not being on the roster day after day after day and saying, well, Adam Frazier's hitting 210 over his last 12 games. Jordan Westburg's hitting 350, promote Westburg. Instead, they jumped the gun a little bit. We'll see how it goes. I think this is indicative of how the Orioles are going to address any offensive woes for the rest of the season. I wouldn't expect they make any big moves on the offensive side because we do still kind of have one card to play there, and that's testing Kerstad at some point. If he keeps hitting like he has been, I would imagine that'll happen as well. But yeah, really exciting. Jess, you're welcome to give your thoughts on the timing of the promotion, as well as maybe what you're kind of expecting from these two moving forward.
Well, I mean, so especially if, I mean, I guess I can start with Westburg, especially if he is playing and hitting as well as he has been. I expect him to keep making it into the lineup every day. I think Kauser is going to get the bulk of the playing time. I could see, I mean, he's not playing great right now, which it's fine. It's only 5 days through. And I, of course, would expect him to turn it around, more so, at some point in the near future. I think I agree with Eli. The Orioles have been balancing really well playing time, and there are going to be some tough decisions that are coming up for the Orioles. But I expect both of them to be, if not close to, if not everyday players, like throughout the rest of the season. Um, Things can change, obviously, if there is a real onset of struggles, which, as good as these guys are, we have to remember, I mean, it is their rookie season, and we have to be prepared and have a backup plan if they do start to struggle. So, I mean, Westburg's been so impressive. I mean, we all remember Adley's first month of the season when he really struggled. Adley's sort of struggling right now. But the thing is that I mean, we need to have backup plans, and we need to be prepared for if these guys do struggle. But barring any major setbacks, and I expect these guys to be playing almost every day. I will say, being a little, looking into the future, if I am, of course, the fact that we're making the playoffs, I mean, you could say we're playing with house money or whatever. I don't like that analogy, but it's just sort of the easiest one to say right now. The Orioles making the playoffs, you could say the Orioles are sort of playing with house money because they're way ahead of schedule in terms of winning, and the fact that but if I am assessing sort of and thinking about our playoff journey, if the Orioles were going to win this year, like we were always going to be heavily reliant on a lot of young talent, right? But I don't love the idea of us heading into the playoffs and a third of our starting lineup has made their debut this year, or well, I guess Henderson technically came up at the end of last year, right? But all these guys that are so inexperienced, right? Plus you have Adley, right, who's just 2 years into his career,
Sure.
So I don't thinking about, I think it's going to be a big challenge for Hyde to figure out a sort of way to overcome that. The pressure, the emotion, they're going to be playing against these guys who have been to the playoffs every year. And as far as, even continuing through the season, right, trying to figure out if a guy does struggle for a week, okay, what do we do, right? Do we start sitting him more? Do we give him half the playing time? Do we keep him in there and push through and hope that he's going to figure it out? Like, those sorts of considerations are going to be really difficult and challenging, I think, when the Orioles are trying to make a push for first place in the division or up their seeding in the playoffs and stuff like that. Those things are going to be really hard. So I'm concerned about our playoff picture and what seed we're going to have when we get there, and sort of, how those sorts of decisions are made when these young players inevitably experience adversity. But then also, what are we going to do when we get to the playoffs and we got a bunch of rookies or near rookies that are making up half of our lineup? So,
yeah, no, I think that's totally fair. And I think, unfortunately or fortunately, whatever, like this was always going to be what had to happen at some point. Just the way Mike Elias has built this team is there was no avoiding it. There was going to be a year where you needed to debut a bunch of guys at the same time. And like I said, Kerstad's probably going to be up at some point unless he's part of a trade package, which is entirely possible. But yeah, unfortunately, it's awesome the Orioles are so good this year, and the Orioles need to take advantage of the moment. You never know if this is going to come again and be on like this 9,500 win pace again, even if things go well. This can never happen again. So the Orioles need to take advantage of this moment. They need to find reinforcements at the trade deadline, that's for sure. But at the same time, I think we all are aware that I feel like for the longest time, 2024 has been the year in most people's minds for when this was all going to start to click. And that maybe baked in this year. And maybe we thought this year was going to be like an 85 win year. Last year was going to be like a 70 win, 75 win. It's all happened a year sooner. This is just what's going to happen. But I think that's totally fair, Jesse, that a team with a bunch of young players is not exactly set up great to find a ton of success in the postseason. But the Orioles, I think, have tried to thread that needle, and that's why they went and got an Aaron Hicks to kind of bring that veteran influence in. They kind of got the insurance policy before they got the players up here. They sort of did it in reverse a little bit, and I don't know if that's going to work out. Right now, though, I would say the offense is like not what I'm worried about at all. I think the offense is in a good spot to be competitive. It's more the pitching that I'm worried about, and that in its own way has a lot of young-ish guys and unestablished players in, Kramer, Bradish, Grayson Rodriguez. That's a lot of guys that don't have a super long track record. So I think it's not as obvious on the pitching side because the guys aren't quite as young, but the same problems kind of pop up. And yeah, it's going to be a tough thing for Brandon Hyde and even the front office to sort out. That's totally valid. All right. Anything else to talk about on Cowser and Westburg before we move on? All right. Let's talk starting pitchers. As we just kind of referenced a moment ago, that's kind of been the spot on the team for most of the season that's been a bit worrying. And there hasn't been any sign that it was going to improve too much until just recently. The starting rotation has a 3.26 ERA over the last 10 games. They're averaging just under 6 innings pitched per game. Even Cole Irvin's been pretty solid lately. Just his last start, he went 6 1/3, allowed 1 earned run on 3 hits against the Twins. Not to mention, Grayson Rodriguez looks really good in AAA Norfolk. Again, he seems to have figured out a lot of the walk issues that he's had. This most recent start was only 3 innings, and according to the Orioles, was a planned shorter outing as it seemingly tried to temper his innings as the season goes on. But the start before that, he went 6 scoreless and struck out 12. So, Eli, I ask you as our resident pitcher, what do you think about the rotation right now? Is everything fixed? And are they going to lead this team to glory or what?
Everything fixed is a relative thing. So, in terms of do we have a staff, that is competitive in Major League Baseball? The answer is yes. I think that Bradish, Kramer, and Wells are showing us what they're capable of. I think that the performance that they have is here to stay. I think all of them have refined themselves. They all showed flashes at times last year. Wells was more consistent, but battling the injuries. Bradish had a super strong second half. Kramer was similar. This year, I think they're finally starting to put together their full repertoire. Bradish is using the slider more. Wells is, just managing to keep people off base, which is super important when you give up 18 home runs a game. And yeah, I mean, Kramer has stopped throwing a cutter middle into lefties and giving up unbelievably hard contact on that. So, there have been some very concrete improvements. I think that the thing in my mind is, you look at a playoff team and you go and you say, all right, who are your 3 or 4 starters who are matching up against, I don't know, let's go Yankees, Garrett Cole, Carlos Rodon, Severino, who we obviously just took care of, and Domingo Germán, who we also took care of. But, really who's matching up in those first 2 games? And if we end up playing in Yankee Stadium somehow, some way, at some point we will, the thought of Tyler Wells going in and being so homer prone is concerning. The thought of, I don't know, we don't have a true ace on this team. We don't have somebody who can really come in and command the moment in the way that you look for in a playoff game. Somebody that, when they talk about a game 7, there's not even a question in your mind. You are setting the rotation so that person lines up. Yeah. We don't have that, we've talked about Kyle Gibson as who would start the first game of the playoffs. It's Kyle Gibson, and I think he might be fading from our minds as the answer to that question. Yeah. But, it is the fact that he's entertained in that conversation is like worrisome for a playoff team. So, despite the challenges on the trade market, I do really think it's a thin trade market. I think that the Orioles need to find a way to cough up some prospect capital and find a way to lock down an Eduardo Rodriguez or Lucas Giolito. Excuse me, somebody who, while they might not be a Garrett Cole, because Garrett Cole is not available this year, they are the top line of the market. They show some investment, and we have that face, that we say, this is our guy heading forward this year. I think that's important, and I think we need to make that commitment.
Can I just add to that? I really genuinely think this is sort of the litmus test, right, for the Orioles, right? This is going to be the opportunity for the fans to see how serious the Orioles really are about winning this year, right? And if the Orioles decide to not go get a starting pitcher at the deadline, then, I mean, of course, Hyde and Elias will do everything possible, right, to try to win in the playoffs when it gets to that time. It's not like they're not going to be like staying up all night trying to figure things out. They are, obviously. I'm not saying they're really not serious about their jobs, but I am saying that they are deferring to future years and hoping to do as well as they can this year in the playoffs, but they are really not giving the team the resources and what it needs to be successful in the playoffs. So the team might be successful in the playoffs, right? It's very possible, but there's a clear and present thing that the Orioles could add that the Orioles have been putting off adding, which is a front of the line starting pitcher. And now that we have this success of this Orioles team, we will really be able to know whether the Orioles and the front office is really going for it this year or not. If they don't get that front of the line top end, I'm not saying it has to be a Garrett Cole, but if they don't go get an Eduardo Rodriguez or Giolito or somebody in this ballpark, then they're really not serious about winning this year overall. And they're hoping things, will repeat themselves in the future, and they're going to have more chances in future years. But I think the Orioles are in a position where right, just like you were saying, Tyler, this can never be guaranteed. Every opportunity you have to win a World Series, you cannot take it for granted. So I think the Orioles need to act decisively and try to make the team better to prep for the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, I've got nothing really to add there. They definitely have to do something. The solutions are not necessarily coming from inside the house. Grayson Rodriguez will be up. I think he'll be better than he was the first time, but he's still a rookie. I don't think you can say, hey, this is our ace for the playoffs. Just not realistic. John Means, it sounds like will be back at some point, but he's not going to be no-hitter John Means. Like, I don't think you can expect that from a guy coming back after being out for more than a year. I think if John Means comes back and can be a multi-inning weapon out of the bullpen, that's awesome, and they need that too. So I don't turn my nose up at that at all. But he's not the ace answer to the issues. But yeah, they need to do a number 2 or something. They need to get a number 2 or hopefully a number 1. I just don't know. Getting a number 1 in the middle of the season doesn't feel like this Orioles regime's type of move. I just don't.
Absolutely not.
I don't see it. I think they would love to go sign somebody unrestricted, which Eduardo Rodriguez likely will be this off. He's got a player option for $18 million. He's not taking that. If he continues to pitch and doesn't get hurt, he's not taking that. So I don't see it happening. I could see a number 2 for a Giolito or something like that. If they could, I think like Hudson Haskin is a player that's probably going to be on the move. He's got to be protected from the Rule 5 this offseason. There's not a lot of room on that roster for it. I think Joey Ortiz could be on the move as much as it might hurt some of us here at this podcast. The infield's getting crowded. I could see him on the move. And then, you start to get into like the Heston Kjerstad types. That feels kind of rich for this front office's blood in terms of moving a player for a 1-year rental. So we'll see. Pitching's better. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, what do you think about Mountcastle these days? Do you think we're like looking at a true platoon with him and O'Hearn, or do you think that we're like
And
potentially moving
Santander
on?
kind of.
I like having
Hmm.
Mountcastle for this season. I don't view him as like a long-term fixture in the lineup.
Yeah.
And I think, all the issues we see with him are exactly what other teams see with him. But no, I kind of love the idea of him playing against left-handed pitching because he's
Right.
crushing them this year. And he's still a really good power threat on this team, which we need. The Orioles don't have a ton of power. I mean, maybe if Gunnar keeps hitting like he is, that's huge. Anthony Santander has been great the last month or so. But they need the power. And I would keep Mountcastle for now, but I think in the offseason, he can become some sort of a trade chip. I don't know what he's worth, but I like the idea of a platoon for right now.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah. Go ahead,
So-
Jess.
Yeah, so what about, I just mentioned Santander. What about, granted, you don't really platoon three guys, but like, what about him at first?
I don't mind that too. I think you mix and match and see what you're feeling. Do any of us buy that Ryan O'Hearn is gonna keep doing this for the rest of the season? I don't think so. I mean, he keeps doing it, but
I'm kind of bought in. I think we found something.
maybe
I don't know.
maybe
Maybe not hitting 340 like he is, but
Right.
I could definitely see 280 with legitimate power.
Yeah, it's just that his batting average on balls in play is still 357. That's just like so absurdly high. I mean, he's hitting the ball hard.
Yeah, he's got like the
But-
second since he came up, he's got the second or third highest average exit velocity. It's
Yeah.
like absolutely insane.
I mean, they might have fixed him. That's why I'm saying you don't give up on him. And I think the Orioles, if they thought it's all smoke and mirrors, he'd be gone and Mountcastle be starting every day. But I think you don't have to get rid of Mountcastle. He could be sent down. He's got options. Like they can be flexible with it. And I like the idea of mixing and matching, trying different things. We'll see if Aaron Hicks sticks around the whole year. I have my doubts about that too. Cowser might get sent down if he struggles for a long period of time. Like they've shown a willingness to do that. So I think you just kind of keep mixing and matching and keeping your 40-man roster as strong as possible, which the Orioles have kind of started to do this year, with the exception of like occasionally having that extra catcher for like no real reason. But that's like it. Besides that, they've just tried to keep like the best 40 players around as long as possible.
Do you see so you don't really see Mountcastle as a potential trade chip?
Not right now. I think the tool he has is a unique tool that they need. They need a right-handed batter that can come off the bench or start against left-handed pitching. They need that because they're so lefty heavy. They do need a righty that can mix things up a bit. So I think the skill set he has is what they need. All right, let's talk 2023 MLB draft. So the picks are still coming in. The draft hasn't wrapped up just yet. But the Orioles made their first round pick, which is the one that I think everybody kind of makes the most judgment on. So we'll talk about him first. They took Enrique Bradfield Jr. out of Vanderbilt. He's an outfielder, went 17th overall. He's got two big carrying tools, and that would be his speed, which everyone agrees is 80 grade, top tier speed right now. And then his defense, which folks kind of oscillate between a 70 to an 80 grade already right now as well. Those are two really powerful skill sets for a center fielder. But there are some hitting concerns. Eli, do you kind of want to give us the rundown on Bradfield, including those hitting concerns?
Yeah, Keith Law alluded to potentially like him getting a little bit too deep into his load and everything. As you guys know, I'm more on the pitching side of things, so I won't pretend to go too far into it. But, basically this year he did only hit about 270 and showed a general lack of power. The slugging was over 400 still, but Division I college baseball is notoriously hitter friendly. So if you're not slugging 500, that is kind of a down year, as a first round draft prospect. So I was initially like super, super surprised by this pick. That said, somebody on the ESPN broadcast then mentioned that he had only a 12% chase rate, which is about half of, the Division I average. And you look at his on base percentage and it's up over 400, and taking into account the lower batting average relative to the offensive environment. Having an OBP that high is super impressive, not chasing pitches. And, he's the kind of guy that the Orioles think they can like build out that offensive profile. Somebody who's got bat control, somebody who will not strike out, he did walk more than he struck out in college. He like does kind of profile if the Orioles can work some magic as, a top of the lineup kind of guy, a table setter, somebody who gets on base, wreaks absolute havoc on the bases. He stole over 100 bases. I think it was like 130 stolen bases and 147 tries or something like that in college. He, like we said, even if that hitting doesn't pan out, he is immediately like an elite defender in center field at the MLB level as it stands right now. Tyler alluded earlier to he studies tape, he studies his opponents, he studies pitchers when he's on the base paths. He seems like a super cerebral guy. He seems like somebody who will be able to take on the challenge of playing one of the most difficult positions on the field at the highest level, and will be able to do it with grace. So, from that standpoint, he's got this incredibly high floor. And when you are taking, your first pick at the middle of the round, having somebody with such a high floor is a huge win. I think only half of first round picks ever make it to the big leagues, period. So, he seems like somebody who, at the absolute worst, has a ton of value in his defense, can come up and, at least hold his own as a fourth outfielder at the absolute least. So in that sense, yeah, you have to give props where they're due. It seems like a relatively safe pick as far as they go.
Yeah, and I think your point about the miss rate on first round picks across the league is an important one too, because this is now the 17th overall pick the Orioles are taking, not the first overall pick, the second overall pick. This is going to be a little bit more of a crapshoot than Orioles fans have become used to the last 4 or 5 years. Seeing Colton Cowser come up immediately, seeing Jackson Holliday make it all the way to Double-A this week. That was another big news item we haven't really touched on. Yeah. That's probably not going to happen. I mean, Bradfield could come that fast because he's a college outfielder, but yeah, it's going to be a little bit of a different circumstance there. Jess, your take on the draft pick of Bradfield, and anything else you want to touch on so far with the draft?
No, I mean, I think kind of like Eli was saying, I think it's a really it's a safe pick in a sense, right? I don't think it doesn't seem like he's a guy that's going to be a bust. Of course, injuries could happen, but I think he's one of the safer picks the Orioles could have made. So I think it's great in that sense. I feel like Eli said everything except the most like common thing that's been circulated is that his MLB comparison is Kenny Lofton, which I mean, that would be great if he turned into a Kenny Lofton.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't think Kenny Lofton didn't make the Hall of Fame, but I think, he was sort of in that conversation. Like he was that good, but this isn't about Kenny Lofton exactly. So, no, but I mean, I think he's a safe pick. I think there's a lot of excitement around him. I've been, I love that the Orioles are now a team that has some speed, and that's a really exciting component of baseball the Orioles have not had for a long time. So if he ends up being the center fielder of the future for the Orioles, and I could imagine him, I mean, maybe him and Mullins will play at the same time together, and he'll play in left or something. But I could also see a situation where he takes over from Mullins in center and sort of hits first in the lineup, and has 40 or 50 stolen bags in a year. I mean, I was listening to the guys, they were talking like in the realm of 60, 70 stolen bases at the major league level, which that sounds pretty. That would be absolutely incredible. If that was his situation when he got to the major leagues. Of course, I think a lot of that would be determined by his batting average and on base percentage, whether he would be able to achieve something like that. Not, it's a skill that, stealing bases requires first getting on base. But
as we've learned with Jorge Mateo. Exactly.
Right. So, I mean, it's definitely exciting, and I appreciate that the Orioles are, beginning to value this skill set in a way that the Orioles have not in the past. So no, I'm really excited for him. So
Yeah, I just out of curiosity, I looked up Kenny Lofton's baseball reference. So his career, he generated 68.4 career WAR, which is fantastic. Not in the Hall of Fame, you're right, Jess, but he did make 6 All-Star games and won 4 Gold Gloves and led the league in stolen bases 5 different times. The most bases he ever stole in a season was 75 in the 1996 season. So if Bradfield gets anywhere close to that, this is a home run pick.
I will. Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say real quick, like the idea of 60, 70 bags is not totally foreign. I'd say Esteury Ruiz and Ronald Acuna are both on pace for that this year with the new rules. So
yeah, doesn't Ruiz have like 40 something? Or
right?
That's absurd at the
All-Star. But both of them are just going crazy. I think they both have 40.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's like the speed is legit, and he talks about how he studies pitchers. He talks about how he notices shifts in their posture, shifts in just the littlest giveaways that can tell him when they're about to come throw over, come pick, whatever.
So it's more than just running fast, right? Like you're talking about. He also has this. He has the particular base stealing skill, is what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right. So.
Yeah, no, it'll be good. And I think like one last thing on that is just the thing that scouting reports have started to say about not scouting reports, but just like scouts and people in the industry have started saying about the Orioles is that they've kind of earned the benefit of the doubt when it comes to developing hitters with issues. Like the Orioles currently have the secret sauce with developing hitters. So they feel it's the type of thing where if you pick the Orioles picking Bradfield is very interesting, whereas a decade ago the Orioles picking them would have been like, well, he's gonna fall apart and they're not gonna figure that guy out, so that's a shame.
We'll never see him again.
Yeah,
right,
exactly.
Yeah. No, but I guess to comp him to somebody else in the system offensively, the speed and defense are a totally different thing, but if we could turn him into a Cesar Prieto, and he has that sort of like bat to ball skill, on base percentage, like that kind of offensive profile, then that at the major league level is unbelievably valuable. He instantly becomes probably a top 5 center fielder in the game, just on the defense alone. And so there is a path to seeing him becoming a productive major league player.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll see. He's hopefully going to be a fast riser, but that was the start of the Orioles draft. We will have more on this once the draft's complete and we get a full picture of what the Orioles did there. But interesting first pick there. And then finally, we just want to wrap up with some second half outlook and predictions. This should be pretty fast because we are going to do one more episode before the trade deadline, but it's likely that some moves happen between now and then. But the Orioles entered the All-Star break only 2 games back of the Rays. That's like the smallest gap they've had in months. And so I asked to you, Jesse, can the Orioles? I think we all right now expect the Orioles are going to be a playoff team. It's just trending that way. But do you think they can win the American League East, Jesse?
So what I'll say is I think this question entirely depends on what the Orioles choose to do at the trade deadline. I think even if I think even if the Orioles don't do anything, I think there's still a remote possibility that the Orioles can win the division, even with doing nothing at the deadline. But I think it is a remoter possibility. I think I think we have to keep in mind the competition of who we're against in this race, which is the Tampa Bay Rays, which is an organization that has been here before, that knows exactly what they're doing. I mean, I know you don't like the organization, Tyler, from they're very business-like, right, in how they run, and cold-blooded, I guess, is another good way to say it. But with that said, they're effective in a lot of ways. Sure. So I would not love to be the Orioles in a situation where we're, going toe to toe down the wire with the Rays. That is not this situation, I would draw it up in my head. I mean, of course, the Orioles have gained ground on them, and we are, like we were saying, only 2 games out. We haven't been been this close to them at any point in the season. Of course, they got off to the amazing start at the beginning of the year. But so I wouldn't count on it, but how much a question of this first round of winning the division, how important is that, is also an important question. And I still think the Orioles have playoff possibilities even if we don't win it, even though of course there are a lot of luxuries that come along with winning the division. So not having the having to bye in the first round.
Well, yeah, winning the East, you'd get a bye. Yep.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, but the other thing about it is if we're the top wild card, we could end up playing the AL Central winner.
That's true. No, we wouldn't, because the Central would still be a higher seed, unfortunately, because they'd be a division winner. So the Central winner will be the
they'd play the bottom wild card.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how. You're right.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. All right. Well.
Now we gotta win the division.
Never mind.
No,
so maybe we need to be a worse wild card.
All I meant by that is even in this newer playoff format, there have been wild card teams that have had real success in the playoffs. So it's not like everything's over if you're a wild card.
Yeah.
But yeah.
No,
but
for
of course
sure.
it could help.
Absolutely. Eli, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that, so one fun fact is the last time the Orioles were 2 back of the Rays was when we were 3-2 and they were 5-0.
Mm-hmm.
I saw that the other day and that was kind of amusing. So we have battled almost all the way back.
The square one, basically.
Yeah, right. But that said, I think that this Orioles team is very, very genuinely good. We talk about superstar talent as something that's kind of missing from us. I do think that, if we do have that, I think it's coming in the form of Gunnar Henderson. He's really, really caught fire and is starting to become that, the name on the lineup card that gets circled. Adley has been a steady producer all year, but Gunnar's just shown the ability to impact the ball in a way that Adley has not. And that's not a knock on Adley in the least. He is an incredible on-base guy, and he belongs in the heart of absolutely any lineup. But I think we are starting to develop a little bit of that star power, and then I think at the same time, this lineup just keeps getting longer. You look at somebody like an Aaron Hicks, who, still debatable whether he'll be able to keep this up all year, but having him hitting 7 is just such a better position than 98% of teams in the league, which mathematically would exclude all but one team. So that's not a literal statement. But and we've got Westburg and Kauser down hitting in the bottom 3 of our lineup. There's really you look at this lineup, and for a starting pitcher, it's absolutely relentless. And so I think in that way, this team really is rounding out in the form. And I think that we're formidable. I don't necessarily think that means this team is at, the best form that it could be over the next 5 years. I don't think that's true. I think we can add that impact. But that said, I think we absolutely wear people down. We saw it with Joe Ryan this last game before the break. He's got us through 4 scoreless. He's absolutely mowing us down. And you just get him to throw enough pitches by taking good at-bats, making him actually have to work his way through the lineup. And sure enough, we get him out in the 5th inning and end up scoring 15 runs. So, I think that this lineup is really, really capable of going toe-to-toe with a lot of teams in this league. And I think it bodes well. I think there is an outside chance we take the division. My money would be on the Rays, but like we've said, I think if the Orioles go out and make some moves, then we put ourselves in a good spot.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what I will say is the Orioles are even with the Rays in the loss column right now. They've played 4 fewer games than the Rays, which is a positive and a negative. The positive is we've got a very clear path that we don't need any help from the Rays to tie them in the division. We could win those 4 games and we are tied. The negative is that means we've got fewer off days the remainder of the season compared to the Rays, and that's a bummer. That's just the way the schedule has happened. It's not been a ton of rainouts or anything like that. But right there is a very clear path to taking the division, because the Orioles also play the Rays a couple more times in the second half. So certainly possible. I agree with you guys that the Rays are probably still slightly ahead just because the pitching, there's just a difference in the pitching, the ability at the top of their rotation compared to ours. But as we've said in this podcast episode, the Orioles have plenty of prospect capital there to make a move to correct that and even the playing field. And then I think, once this offense is firing on all cylinders, you could make the argument it is better than what the Rays have. But we haven't seen that just yet. So yeah, I definitely think you give the advantage to the Rays, but the Orioles certainly have a shot. And it's just crazy that we're kind of just talking as if the playoffs are a foregone conclusion, which they aren't, but this team just keeps chugging along. And it's hard to not feel positively about them. And until they prove otherwise, that's how I'm going to look at them. So we'll see. But yeah, anything else to talk about with, how the first half has played out and what you expect from the second half before we get out of here and watch Adley?
I got one question about the second half here.
Hit me.
Ignoring trade deadline possibilities, is there a chance we see Kobe Mayo in September?
Oh, the infield, if he's a third baseman still, which the Orioles are putting him that way, whereas a lot of scouts have said he's a right fielder. If he's a third baseman, I don't know where he is going to play.
You can see I don't know, Westburg at second, Gunnar at short, Mayo at third, or DH.
Yeah, that's a lot.
I know, it's a lot.
Because he plays.
He's just been on such a ridiculous rise. It does remind me of Gunnar in last year in 2022.
It's possible. I mean, I think is one of the fun facts about Bradfield, the guy they just drafted, that he played in Little League or with
he did
with Kobe Mayo. So to say a guy we just drafted is the same age as a guy that is going to be debuting on the team, next month, it's possible. It's definitely possible. That's adding to Jesse's comment earlier. That's another very young player thrown into the mix there. That, the fact that he's been promoted to AAA, he's on the doorstep. So it's certainly possible. But cool. I would bet against it, but
I would too, but we can dream.
Yeah, absolutely. Or we see him, he's the guy traded for a freaking ace at the deadline, because that might do it too.
Right. If he gets traded, we better be getting something really good back. I think he is so unbelievably valuable, and I think he's a top 30 prospect in the game right now. He's got that kind of helium.
You're right about that. Which that becomes a whole different conversation we might have to have in a couple weeks here, is who are you okay with the Orioles giving up depending on the return. But we've got a couple more weeks to dream about that, I think.
Yeah. They're going to have to make some tough decisions. Yeah,
absolutely. But it's nice that we're in this position, because it's been a long 5 years. So exciting. But all right, cool. Well, we'll wrap it up there. We did go over our 40 minutes, but looking at my TV right now, it looks like we're just going to get this done in time. But so what you guys can do to support the podcast, give us a follow on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. We're at The Warehouse Pod. We don't have a Threads account yet, but I guess we should probably do that.
I guess, we got to look into it.
Between now and us publishing this, hopefully we get our handle. But you can also please subscribe to the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Just search The Warehouse Podcast, and we should pop up there. Also go to thewarehousepod.substack.com, and you can subscribe to us there, and it'll get emailed to you. And for those of you unfamiliar with what Threads is it's Facebook/Meta's new Twitter competitor, basically.
I just want to throw out the reason that Tyler felt compelled to say that is Jesse messaged us and said, I don't know what Threads is.
It's okay. Jesse only goes on Instagram, and that's it. So I understand he doesn't understand that this thing that I'm sure Instagram has been pushing on us on Instagram, he doesn't know about that thing, but no problem.
Thank you.
But anytime, Jessica, we're here to educate. But yeah, I think that's all we've got. So thank you so much for tuning in. Give us a follow, give us a subscribe, and rate us 5 stars if you can. Until next time, this has been the Warehouse Podcast. I'm Tyler.
I'm Jesse.
And I'm Eli.
Thanks for listening.